I said, well, yeah, I can do that, but I'm much more drawn to the Sundance Kid. And he got convinced of that. So I played Sundance. So they switched the title. It was originally going to be the Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy.
Few figures have shaped modern American cinema as profoundly as Robert Redford. For more than 6 decades, he has balanced art and activism. An actor who became a director, a storyteller who became a visionary. Whether charming audiences in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, winning Oscars for Ordinary People, or founding the Sundance Institute to nurture independent voices, Redford has always championed authenticity. Now, at 89, when asked which films have meant the most to him, Redford doesn't cite his own hits or awards. Instead, he turns to the movies that shaped him, the ones that taught him about integrity, beauty, and the human struggle. His 6 personal favorites span continents and eras, stories of ambition, greed, illusion, and solitude. Together, they reveal not just a filmmaker's taste, but a man's philosophy of life. In this video, we'll count down Robert Redford's 6 favorite films, exploring what each one taught him about storytelling, character, and the craft he's devoted his life to. Each title uncovers a different side of Redford: the adventurer, the realist, the dreamer, and the craftsman. Let's begin with number 6, the film that reflects his own spirit of survival and solitude. Number 6, Jeremiah Johnson, Sidney Pollack, 1972. Robert Redford's journey through cinema often comes back to one theme: man versus nature, and the search for solitude in a world that keeps closing in. No film captures that better than Jeremiah Johnson, his collaboration with longtime friend and director Sidney Pollack. It's not just a Western, it's a story about retreat, resilience, and the spiritual cost of isolation. And among his own performances, this is the one Redford has repeatedly called his favorite. Based on real frontier legends, Jeremiah Johnson follows a Civil War veteran who abandoned civilization to live as a mountain man in the Rockies. Redford's portrayal of Johnson isn't romanticized. He's awkward at first, fumbling through the wilderness, learning to hunt, fish, and survive by trial and error. As the seasons pass, the man who once fled society becomes one with the land. His silence says as much as his actions, and his grief, after losing his family to violence, hardens into a wordless, stoic endurance. In interviews, Redford has said that Jeremiah Johnson was the film that most reflected who I was at that time. He wasn't exaggerating. The movie was filmed entirely on location in Utah's rugged mountains, a region he would later transform into the heart of his Sundance Institute. Redford did many of his own stunts, braving real blizzards and long remote shoots. For him, the experience wasn't about Hollywood glamour. It was about authenticity, the same value that would define his directing and his lifelong commitment to independent cinema. Critics at the time were divided. Some expected another heroic Western full of gunfights and swagger. Instead, they got a quiet, introspective meditation on solitude and survival, the man learning how to live with nature instead of conquering it. Over time, though, audiences came to see what Redford and Pollack were doing, redefining the Western as a story about living, not killing. It was less about taming the frontier and more about understanding it. There's a haunting simplicity in Johnson's journey. Each chapter of his life is marked by loss, of home, of companionship, of peace. Yet he endures, and somehow that endurance becomes the film's poetry. Redford once said that what drew him to the character was his independence, his need to live by his own code. You can see that same philosophy echoed throughout Redford's real life. His resistance to Hollywood trends, his creation of Sundance as a haven for personal filmmaking, and his respect for stories grounded in truth rather than spectacle. In many ways, Jeremiah Johnson feels like a spiritual autobiography, the movie that most clearly mirrors the man behind the star. It's about choosing solitude over fame, integrity over comfort, and authenticity over applause. If you could walk away from modern life and live alone in nature, no phones, no headlines, no noise, would you do it? Would solitude bring peace or just a new kind of loneliness? Number 5, 8 1/2. Federico Fellini, 1963. When Robert Redford talks about the power of cinema, he often mentions the films that dared to explore the artist's inner world. No movie captures that creative chaos better than Federico Fellini's 8½, a film that Redford has cited as one of his all-time favorites. It's not a conventional story, but a mirror maze of imagination, memory, and dream, following a director who has lost faith in his own art. Fellini's alter ego, Guido Anselmi, played by Marcello Mastroianni, wanders through the wreckage of his life and career. Haunted by women, priests, producers, and half-built film sets, he searches for meaning as his latest movie collapses around him. For Redford, who later moved behind the camera himself, 8½, represents everything brave about filmmaking. The willingness to show confusion and doubt instead of hiding behind polish. Redford has long admired directors who reveal their inner struggles through art. In interviews, he said that the filmmakers who interest him most are those who let the seam show, the ones who admit to imperfection. Fellini does exactly that. 8½, is a film about not knowing what to do next, and somehow that uncertainty becomes its greatest beauty. Watching Guido drift between dreams and reality, Redford saw something deeply familiar.
In napoletano, vero, conosci? Ma non lo vedi che io non ho balbetto. Balbetto.
The anxiety of an artist trying to live up to his own ideals. By the time 8½, was released, Redford was still an up-and-coming actor, but it would profoundly shape his sense of visual storytelling. The movie's flowing camera work, overlapping memories, and bursts of surreal humor gave him a new understanding of what cinema could be: personal, poetic, and unpredictable. Decades later, when Redford directed Ordinary People and A River Runs Through It, critics noted his preference for introspection over spectacle. You can trace that back to Fellini, the courage to slow down, to let a face or silence reveal the story, rather than force it through dialogue. Beyond its technical brilliance, 8½ also spoke to Redford's lifelong fascination with identity, how public figures struggle to separate who they are from what people expect of them. Guido, surrounded by admirers and critics, feels trapped by his own reputation. Redford, a private man who spent much of his career under the weight of fame, clearly understood that. The film's final circus-like sequence, where Guido invites everyone from his past to dance together in reconciliation, resonated deeply with him. It was Fellini saying that life, for all its mess and contradiction, must go on. To Redford, 8½ isn't just a masterpiece. It's a confession, and he's always admired honesty over perfection. Watching it, he once remarked, felt like seeing the creative mind turned inside out. It reminded him that art is never about control. It's about surrender. Do you think creativity thrives on chaos, or does it need order to survive? Have you ever felt that the best ideas come only when you stop trying so hard to control them? Number 4. All About Eve, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, 1950. Robert Redford has always been fascinated by stories about ambition. Not the easy, heroic kind, but the kind that burns quietly until it consumes everything. That's why Joseph L. Mankiewicz's All About Eve ranks high among his favorite films. Released in 1950, it remains one of Hollywood's most piercing portraits of ego, envy, and the cost of fame. Redford once said he admired films that show how success changes people. And All About Eve does exactly that, with sharp wit, perfect performances, and dialogue so clever it still bites 70 years later. The film follows Margot Channing, a legendary Broadway actress played by Bette Davis, and her devoted fan Eve Harrington, portrayed by Anne Baxter.
I'm on my way. Is there anything more you've thought of?
Where's that script to take back to the guild?
I've got it.
At first, Eve appears innocent, a young admirer who only wants to learn. But slowly, methodically, she begins to replace Margot, her understudy, her rival, her reflection. By the end, she's the new star, standing where Margot once stood, repeating the same mistakes. For Redford, it's a perfect metaphor for Hollywood itself, the endless cycle of worship and betrayal that defines fame. As a director, Redford appreciates how Mankiewicz balances theatrical flair with cinematic precision. The camera glides through dressing rooms and cocktail parties, catching whispers and glances that reveal more than any speech. It's a world of performance layered on performance. Actors playing parts. Redford has always admired such subtlety. He once commented that he values films that let silence and timing carry weight. All About Eve is built on those principles: pauses, looks, and words that cut like knives. It's also a movie about aging, something Redford has handled with quiet dignity in his own career. Margot's fear of becoming irrelevant mirrors the fear of every artist who's ever felt the spotlight dim. Redford, who stepped away from acting to direct ordinary people, understood that survival in show business isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to evolve. Like Margot, he's faced the shifting tides of fame, and perhaps that's why he finds the film so honest. Then there's Marilyn Monroe's small but unforgettable appearance. Redford, who later directed Monroe's final screen test for the Sundance Institute archives, often spoke about her vulnerability behind the glamour. Seeing her early in All About Eve, before the myth fully formed, adds another layer of poignancy. It's Hollywood's innocence before the storm, something Redford has always sought to protect through independent cinema. Every line in the film is sharp enough to quote, but Redford has often pointed to one as the perfect encapsulation of ambition's chaos. Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night to him. That's not just witty dialogue.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
It's a warning about every creative journey, the turbulence that comes when art collides with ego. If you had the chance to reach the top of your field but knew it might cost your peace of mind, would you still climb? Do ambition and happiness ever truly coexist? Number 3. The Third Man, Carol Reed, 1949. If there's one film that captures Robert Redford's love of moral complexity and atmosphere, it's Carol Reed's The Third Man. Set in post-war Vienna, this noir masterpiece unfolds in a city divided by conflict and corruption. A world where loyalty and betrayal are just two sides of the same coin. Redford has often said he gravitates toward films that blur the line between good and evil, and The Third Man is a perfect example. The film follows pulp novelist Holly Martin's Joseph Cotton, who arrives in Vienna to visit his old friend Harry Lime, Orson Welles, only to discover he's apparently dead. But as Holly digs deeper, he realizes that Lime is very much alive, and very much a villain. When Lime finally appears halfway through the film, emerging from the shadows of a dark doorway, it's one of cinema's most iconic entrances. The audience, like Holly, feels the shock of betrayal, but also the thrill of charisma. For Redford, the brilliance of The Third Man lies not just in its plot, but in its tone. Every frame, the tilted camera angles, the wet cobblestone streets, the haunting zither score, drips with paranoia and style. The film was shot amid the ruins of real bombed-out Vienna, and Redford has said that what he admires most about movies like this is their authenticity. They don't fake decay, they find beauty within it. It's the same aesthetic that shaped his own directorial sensibility, capturing imperfection as truth. Then there's Orson Welles' legendary cuckoo clock speech, improvised on set.
They had 500 years of democracy and peace, and what did that produce? The cuckoo clock. So long, Holly.
Lime justifies his crimes by comparing war-torn Europe's chaos to Switzerland's peace. In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed. But they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. And what did that produce? The cuckoo clock for Redford, who reveres Welles as both an actor and a rebel filmmaker. That line embodies the seductive logic of corruption. The idea that greatness is born from turmoil. Redford has always appreciated anti-heroes, characters who wrestle with morality rather than follow it blindly. You can see echoes of Harry Lime's moral slipperiness in some of Redford's own roles. The charming outlaw of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the ambiguous spy in 3 Days of the Condor, or the disillusioned journalist in All the President's Men. Like Welles, he understands that charisma can make even the darkest character fascinating, but The Third Man isn't just about one man's downfall, it's about disillusionment. It asks whether friendship, idealism, and love can survive in a broken world. By the time Holly must decide between saving or destroying his friend, the film has become a reflection on human compromise. Something Redford's own films, especially The Company You Keep and Lions for Lambs, also explore. Would you betray a friend if you discovered their success was built on something immoral? How much loyalty do we owe to someone who's lost their moral compass? 2. Sunset Boulevard, Billy Wilder, 1950. Approximately 550 words. Robert Redford's second pick, Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard, is more than a classic. It's a mirror held up to Hollywood itself. Redford has long admired films that expose the industry's illusions, and few have done it with more venom and melancholy than this 1950 noir. Wilder's masterpiece opens with a dead man floating face down in a swimming pool, narrating his own demise. A perfect metaphor for the seductive trap of fame.
He always wanted a pool. Well, in the end, he got himself a pool.
For Redford, Sunset Boulevard stands as one of cinema's great cautionary tales. The film's protagonist, Joe Gillis, William Holden, is a struggling screenwriter who becomes ensnared in the decaying world of Norma Desmond, Gloria Swanson, a silent film star who refuses to accept that her time has passed. Redford, who rose to fame in the golden age of 1970s Hollywood and later watched the industry transform into something more corporate, relates deeply to Wilder's critique of the dream factory. He said in interviews that what interests him most about Hollywood stories is not the glitz, but the broken hearts behind it. Wilder's film is full of those broken hearts. Norma lives in her crumbling mansion, surrounded by portraits of herself, convinced she's still adored by millions. Joe, desperate and cynical, plays along until he's too far in to escape. When Norma finally snaps, descending her staircase to the line, "Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up."
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
It's one of the most haunting endings in movie history. The moment when delusion fully consumes her. Redford admires how Wilder and Swanson refuse to make her a monster. Instead, she's a tragic relic of an industry that devours its own. Redford has always been fascinated by that duality, how fame elevates and isolates in equal measure. As someone who spent decades under the camera's gaze, yet managed to preserve a private, reflective life, he recognizes the emotional toll of constant visibility. Sunset Boulevard captures that fear perfectly. The terror of being forgotten, of realizing that applause has faded and no one's listening anymore. There's also something in Wilder's craftsmanship that Redford deeply respects. The razor-sharp dialogue, the noir shadows, the ironic narration. Everything is deliberate, yet it feels effortless. Redford has often cited Wilder as one of the directors he learned from as a young actor, admiring how he could weave cynicism and empathy into the same frame. Like The Apartment or Double Indemnity, this film reminded Redford that a movie can be brutal and compassionate at the same time. What keeps Sunset Boulevard timeless for Redford is that its warning still applies. In the age of social media, the hunger for validation, the denial of aging, and the obsession with the spotlight feel more relevant than ever. Norma Desmond might live on Instagram today, her followers feeding her illusion. And Joe Gillis? He'd probably be ghostwriting for influencers. Do you think modern fame is more fleeting or more dangerous than in Norma Desmond's era? Is our current culture creating more Normas than ever before? Number 1. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, John Huston, 1948. Robert Redford's top choice, John Huston's The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, reveals everything he admires about classic cinema. Moral tension, rugged storytelling, and human truth stripped to the bone. Released in 1948, the film follows two down-and-out Americans, Dobbs, Humphrey Bogart, and Curtin, Tim Holt, who join an old prospector, Howard, Walter Huston, in a desperate quest for gold in the mountains of Mexico.
That's good it be. When the gold shines and glitters like that. Struck it, Kurt.
What begins as an adventure quickly devolves into paranoia, greed, and betrayal. For Redford, this film is the purest distillation of human character under pressure. In interviews, he said that he's always been drawn to stories where the setting becomes a test of the soul. Huston's Mexico is exactly that, a sun-bleached crucible where every flaw in a man's nature rises to the surface. Bogart's Dobbs begins as a weary drifter and ends as a man consumed by suspicion. The film's haunting truth, that fortune reveals more than it rewards, has lingered with Redford his whole career. He's also spoken of his admiration for John Huston as a director, a man who could balance grit with grandeur. Huston's films, Redford believes, never glorify struggle. They expose it. In The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, the character's physical exhaustion mirrors their moral decay, and Huston never looks away. Redford once remarked that, "Great films don't tell you who's right. They show you how people break." This film embodies that philosophy. Visually, Sierra Madre was groundbreaking for its time. Shot largely on location, something rare in the 1940s, it traded studio gloss for realism. That decision, according to Redford, was part of its genius. He's often said that location is a character in itself, and Huston's dusty landscapes echo the isolation and madness within his protagonists. As an actor who later filmed Jeremiah Johnson and A River Runs Through It in equally demanding terrains, Redford took inspiration from Huston's commitment to authenticity. The film's themes also resonate with Redford's lifelong fascination with morality and survival. There are no heroes in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, only men pushed to their limits. When Dobbs finally turns on his partners, the violence feels inevitable, not shocking. Huston understood what Redford later explored as a filmmaker, that the line between good and evil is often just a mirage on the horizon. And then there's Walter Huston's performance as Howard, the old prospector who laughs at the futility of greed. His final speech, delivered with dusty wisdom and irony, suggests that nature always wins, that gold is nothing compared to peace of mind. Redford, who spent much of his career advocating for environmental preservation and spiritual balance, surely sees that as the film's truest message. When The Treasure of the Sierra Madre won 3 Academy Awards, for both Huston's, John for directing, Walter for acting, and for its screenplay, it cemented itself as one of Hollywood's defining moral dramas. But for Redford, it's not about the Oscars, it's about truth. He said that great movies strip away everything fake. That's exactly what Huston's film does, leaving only the raw, desperate humanity beneath. If you found a fortune tomorrow, do you think it would change who you are, or simply reveal who you've been all along? Robert Redford's list of favorite films feels less like a ranking and more like a map of his soul. From John Huston's The Treasure of the Sierra Madre to Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard and Carol Reed's The Third Man, each movie reflects a value Redford has carried throughout his own life. Authenticity, integrity, and the search for meaning beneath the surface. These aren't flashy blockbusters or sentimental crowd pleasers. They're tough, intelligent films about human weakness, creative struggle, and survival. When you look at Redford's own career, from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to Jeremiah Johnson, The Candidate, and All the President's Men, you can see the influence of every one of these picks. Huston's moral landscapes, Wilder's satire, Reed's shadows, they all live inside Redford's work. His choices show a deep reverence for filmmakers who took risks, who broke rules, and who understood that cinema could be both art and reflection. It's fitting that Redford's one self-included favorite is Jeremiah Johnson, a film about solitude, resilience, and finding peace away from society's noise. As he nears 90, that sentiment feels like a quiet summary of his own journey. He's a man who has seen Hollywood from every angle. Star, director, producer, activist, yet has always kept his distance from its chaos. In a way, Redford's list isn't just about movies. It's about life lessons told through them. That greed destroys, that fame fades, that beauty can emerge from struggle, and that truth always endures. Which of Robert Redford's 6 favorite films speaks most to you? Have you ever found a movie that changed how you saw the world? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys through the minds of cinema's greatest legends.